Today, we're together with Randall, whom we met at HEF, which stands for the Home Education Family Festival, which takes place each year in the UK. And even though we are not from the UK, we really wanted to attend, both because it's a fantastic festival, but also because we have a lot of friends in the UK who have been homeschooling, unschooling for years, and it was a good way for us to meet up. While being there, we gave a small talk about how it is to world school, as we call what we do with the full-time traveling. And being there, we met Randall. And welcome to you, Randall.
Thank you, Jesper. You came and sat in my session, which followed yours. So that was a full-on introduction of each other.
It was.
So do we have anything to talk about
today?
Yeah,
I would like to just point out how wonderful stupid my mind was. I was looking out over the crowd, who people listening to our talk, and there was this great-haired, great-bearded man, and my first thought was, someone have brought their dad. And there's a reason to the stupidity is we are among the first generation in Denmark who have been homeschooling and unschooling. It's a much newer thing in Denmark than it is in the UK. So we are among the oldest generation. So that's why I was so stupid and forgot that years have gone before us, where a lot of people have fought the fight to make sure that homeschooling and unschooling will be kept legal. And that's one of the things that is interesting about you, is that you are fighting the fight still. So why are you fighting, Randall? What is it that ignites you about it?
Why am I fighting? Because it's important. It's very important.
Good answer.
Because if I could just skip back, I'll come back to this in a second, but you were up before me at the conference, and you always go and you try and sound out where people are coming from. And I think the thing that really rang with me was when together you said that the start of your journey was when you decided that you didn't want to be a family of 5 together and 1 out at work, but you wanted most of the time to be a family of 6 together. And I thought, actually, that thing of being a family that's together for most of the time is far more important than how you then educate your children whilst you're together. And that is what I really warmed to what you were saying. That was the catalyst for unlocking and helping there. And why I think it's important is to do with that, because we live in a culture, a global culture increasingly, where family is undervalued. It's actually pushed to the side.
Yeah.
And one of the sad things for me, even though I'm fighting for home education, is so many of the families are involved, it's only part of the family. Dads are often absent. You may have seen there was probably more mothers around at the festival than there was dads. And I work in amongst a group of activists, and it's rare I'm in any meeting with another guy. Okay, I'm a granddad, but it's rare that the dads are involved. And I'm for family. That's my bottom line. I want families to get stronger. And for us, part of that was our home educating journey. And now I see that not just in England, Wales, Scotland, and other places in Europe, like where you're sat now, France, there's more and more pressure to stop families home educating. The real danger of it is it's to stop families being families.
Yeah.
Because families are families. It was interesting this morning. One of our ex-cabinet ministers appeared on radio talking about suicide. And the way why he was talking about it was a few years ago, his own brother committed suicide. And what struck me was he was having real feelings that he hadn't been the brother to his brother that his brother needed at the time. And that's just another signal that really family is a fundamental building block of human relationships. And home education for us was a way into that. And I see these policies that are being put forward by politicians as if the family was totally irrelevant.
Mm.
And
Yes.
family education to me is far more important. Family-based education. It doesn't have to be isolated family, but it's within the whole family is the important fact. And I'm on a mission really to try and encourage people, and I think your podcast might be a great place to do it, to improve their connections as a whole family. Because as I say, even in home educating circles, that isn't always happening. Dad is under so much pressure to do work, or one of the parents is under so much pressure to do work, they live apart from the family most of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm there. So I think this threat to the family, because let me give you an example. In England, in Wales, in British law, education has always been the responsibility of parents. And this isn't an original from me. I heard it on somebody else's podcast, but it's worthwhile repeating. When I was young, which is getting on now for over 60 years ago, well over 60 years ago, if my parents wanted to keep me off school for a day, I went to the local school, they wrote a note saying to the teacher, "Dear head teacher, we are taking Randall out of school for a day. We're doing something with him. He will be back in the following day." The head teacher would mark that in the register as an authorised absence. Now where we've got to in Britain is parents cannot authorise absence anymore. The school teacher has to.
Yeah.
So if a parent wants to take a week off to go on an educational trip with their children during school term time, and the teacher does not authorise it, they will be fined for every day the child is not in school. I think I've just caught somebody. And that is the way the policy is going. It's anti-family. It is the state is more important than the family. And this is go on.
No, the thing is just you don't trust the family. You don't trust the parents to be able to make this judgment, good judgment, that it would be better to take this day off. You trust the school teacher to make that judgment, which is quite scary when you think about it. It's someone who doesn't really know the child, someone who obviously doesn't love the child unconditionally like parents do. They have the final say.
Yeah.
And somebody who's having the final say because they don't want to get a black mark on their record as a staff member.
Yeah.
Go on, Jasper, you were going to say something.
Yes, I remember our oldest went to a very free school based. It was kind of like the Waldorf schools, and I remember that when we came and wanted to go for a month somewhere, the answer should have been, "That sounds wonderful. That would be wonderful for her to go on a month."
That was the answer.
That was the answer. But if you do that in a public school, we have friends who have tried to do the same. The answer is, "Oh, but they will be disconnected a lot from their friends at school and stuff like that." And just to turn it around, how about the disconnection from your family? If you cannot stay a month together with them because your mom and dad have an opportunity to go travel, it's it's very wild. But I think it starts, unfortunately, I think a lot of parents, including myself on the start of my journey, are so embedded into the reality of this being normal. For me, it was normal that kids should go to a kindergarten. When Cecilia started suggesting to have them at home, I kind of thought she was weird, and it's just part of the personal travel that now I'm a avid fighter for the children's freedom.
Yeah.
But it started that way, and it was normal in my way. And our oldest went to this private school, and I thought it was snobbish. Like, why is the public school not good enough for my child, and all those things, instead of looking at but we don't choose a private school to be snobbish. We chose it based on the pedagogic ideas they had before we were ready to homeschool. And it's just a long travel. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us dads are farther behind on understanding what children needs, and have used less time thinking about the life of a child than mothers have, because they have been immersed in it.
When you're pregnant and you have a child, and you have it in, at least in our country, you get a fair amount of time at home with the child on your own, where the state pays your salary. It really rocks your boat. It's a really big change. It's a change in your body. It's a change in the base of your life. It's a change in your family structure. Changes your relation to your own parents, to your siblings, to your friends, to your spouse. And you have and you're in it, like really soaked in it. Whereas the dads, they stay home. In our country, they get 2 weeks maybe, and then they're back to work. It's not like, it's just like a vacation. Usually they'll go fix something in the garage, and and then they go back to work. So obviously they don't have this. It's not this existential cold shower or hot bath, depending on how you feel about it.
Or both.
You just keep on the same track.
Yeah.
So it makes good sense that the dads can be a little slower to understand. Maybe we need some big changes here.
Yeah.
What I find.
Go on, carry on.
Just because I think it's so important what you say about family, and I also we're advocates for homeschooling and unschooling, but really what I'm advocate for is to have a free life, have a real life where you live inside the life, and a base for a real life is you are in some sort of family relation when you enter, and that's supposed to be the core. That's supposed to be the stone where you stand until you're ready to jump a little bit. And that core is just split from the very beginning. You send people off in different directions. And I'm just wondering how we can support that more, because you say the fathers are not present, but the reality is that that's because they're making the money. So once they comply and are nice and say, okay, let's homeschool, they're alone. That was a big frustration for you, that I said, you know what, I'd rather live in my car than send my kids to school. I'm not going to work. I'm not doing it. I'm not working. I'd rather have rice and tomato for the rest of my life. I'm not doing it. And you were like, okay, thank you very much. Then I have to do it. It was not.
I think part of your story that I heard that day was not just that you wanted to be this whole family, and the real cost counting was on your salaries, Jesper, and what it was going to, and so on. And I think the problem we have faced, we have a system that doesn't value the family. Going back to Cecilia's birthing journey, in some circles, and I hope this isn't too offensive, they actually simply talk about a woman being a birthing uterus.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to develop artificial wombs. And
I don't even want to think about it.
And neither do I. But I think sometimes we have to.
Yeah, I know.
To understand what's happening. That we have got this journey on at the moment where the family is being pulled apart. And it's going to take people with backbone not to be pulled apart with it. And so when you begin to see something, then you've got to say, well, how can I resist this? I started my talk, I know Jasper was a bit late, with saying, understand the difference between the familiar and the normal.
Mm.
And what we've been talking about with the way the family's structured is what has been familiar over the last 20, 30 years is now assumed to be the normal.
Yeah.
Now, when I was little, most mums didn't work, right? They looked after the children. There was not many nurseries, right? But also they looked after the older members of the family. We almost all the time had older members of the family living with us.
Yeah.
Nobody'd heard of old people's homes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm for a reconnecting of the family across generations,
Mm.
and then of those families within a community. And all that is now gone in lots of places. You were saying, Cecilia, that you always felt strange in different things, and suddenly when you found the home educators, the homeschoolers, you suddenly found people you related to. And I think that is maybe in your case was because they were still that bit more focused on family. There is something different about home education. In England, let me tell you, we can get at each other's throats quite a lot. We're very good at falling out, but there is still a community, or there are communities within now the home educating community that is at a level that if a family is split up from whatever time it is, 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, they don't even get a community within themselves.
No.
They're not a community. And the foundation of any community is the family. We live in a rural bit of Britain. For a while, well, for several years, my wife led a volunteer group for visiting elderly people who had nobody to visit them. Why did they have nobody to visit them? Because their kids had all been encouraged to move away, go off to university. The moment somebody goes to university, do they ever come home? Well, they might do soon because they can't afford to live in university accommodation. So they might have, our granddaughter is going to university but living at home. But once they've broken those ties, they've lost the family community. And I see that we need to be encouraging anybody who will hear to this. It's not just all right to reconnect as a family. It's really helpful. And if you've got to reassess how you live and what your values are, well, then do it. It's not impossible. I'm not saying your life is perfect, but you're surviving this strange lifestyle.
Yeah.
Nomadic world schoolers, right? But there is something about it that must keep you going. If it was a real horrible experience for 6 months, you'd probably say, why are we doing
no,
this?
yeah. And it's quite the opposite. It's the best thing we have done in our whole life.
But the thing is also, when it sometimes is a horrible situation, not for 6 months, but maybe for 6 hours. For example, we slept at that construction site recently where we didn't sleep much because it was a construction site. At least we do it together. It becomes family stories. We're this unit of people who love each other and want to spend our time together. And I usually say it takes time to be a family. I can't understand how you can handle having teenagers if they leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, or even before, because they have to be in the school by 8. So they leave at maybe 7:30 and they come back at 4, and then they maybe have homework and they have to do some text messaging with their friends, and they also need a shower. When do you ever talk to them? The hours run out. I'm not being judgmental, I'm trying to not be judgmental about the school decision. I'm just saying, for my relation with my teens, I need at least an hour per child per day to just keep the ball rolling. We really need to talk about these things. We need to be there? Where would those hours be if we were not in the same space? I don't know.
Two things there, right? Number one, taking time to get to talk and things, you've got to do that during life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's not worry about the teenagers being at school. Let's talk about mum and dad being out at work all day. They've both had fairly bad days. They're not feeling very happy. They come home. The last thing anybody wants to do is, one, relive it, and secondly, listen to somebody else reliving it. You know,
Yeah.
and you don't really then connect about how, how's your day been, dear? All right, not so good, but you don't really reconnect. Now you connect that with your kids. Well, I think he was a bit grumpy. One of the best things I heard or read during lockdown was somebody, an author or somebody, she noticed that her grandchildren were thriving from not going to school during lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And she put on Twitter, as it was then called, has anybody else noticed this? And she got a whole load of responses saying yes. And the one line I remember was a mum who posted, "I've got my teenage son back. He's talking to us. He's participating in the family."
Mm. Mm.
And I thought, that is great.
It is.
It was really one of the benefits of lockdown was families reconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some in this country, at least, have said, we don't want to lose this. And now they've added to the number of home educators in Britain because
that's
they
great.
found something. And I'm saying, great,
Yeah. Yeah.
The government's saying we can't have this.
Yeah. That's the downside.
That's the downside. But this is the thing, that to be a family, you need to reconnect. I remember reading an account some time ago about a dad who'd done something with his son, one of his sons, and he wrote in his diary, "Didn't do much today, took Johnny fishing."
Mm.
His son's diary read, "Absolutely wonderful day, Dad took me fishing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed his company," type thing,
Yeah.
And quite often when we do things as a family in our busy Western fragmented lifestyle, it's artificial. It's something you try and construct. But the best things to do during life as a family are the things that need doing together. So as you say, to be a family, you've got to have that time. And you can go off and you don't have to just go for a walk. You can say, "Such your body, are you going to help me do this? Or this needs doing. Do you want to learn how to do it?" And you do that, where if you're in a lifestyle that is shouting at you so much that you can't connect. I mean, you just don't get those times. So I used to be a self-employed electrician when our older children were growing up. And we had two sons who were very different. The eldest one, I could take him out during when he went to a parents-run cooperative school. So during the holidays, I could take him into people's houses, and he could. He was a real help on the job. He's now an electrical engineer, right?
Yeah.
I could give him things to do, and it was a day together for us. Now, sadly, his next brother down was the type of kid who, wherever he was, he had to fiddle with everything he could see. So I could only take him on jobs where I knew the family would cope with that, and that wasn't as many.
No,
But
obviously.
doing things together, real things together, is far more important than just going
to the amusement park, going to the cinema, going to the playground.
Like that. Yeah,
no.
together.
It's actually a thing we've talked about many times about the families that do you want to say something different? You're like,
no, I have a point. Yeah, but I wait.
No, but you can do it.
Okay.
Go first.
Maybe it's the same subject. What we have seen in families that divorce.
Yeah, that was
Yeah. The exact same thing. What we see in families that divorce is that sometimes not all parents that divorce do this, of course not. But we have seen sometimes how the parents and their child, in my world, not live in a reality, because you, as the parent divorcing, want so much quality time with your child that the week you have together, if it's like half, it is leisure time. You go home from work early, you spend time with them, you even wait with washing the clothes, and you wait with doing the garden and everything until it's your week off having children. But it gives a weird reality of what it is to be a person, because it is not fun to do the clothes, it's not done to mow the lawn, and it's not fun to do all these things, but it's part of life. And I think it's a good thing to involve the children in this on every level. That was.
What I think is important is we can sit here, the three of us, and be very much in agreement that it's very good for everyone to be together all the time and invest our time and energy in this life in our spouse and children. And probably most people would agree, and their first question would be, yes, but how do you make money? There is a reason it happens so very often when they finally decide, I mean, we didn't go there too early in our life either, so I'm not being judgmental about it, but when you realize,
I never got there till our children were older.
When you realize you want to home educate, very often the decision is mom will quit her job and stay at home. Maybe she already did quit her job because she was already home with smaller children, and now some of them got older and you don't want them in school, and you just decide, I'm going to not have a career for the next 20 years, which is a big decision to have for a person.
Massive.
But it's okay. I did it. It was fine. It was not hard for me to choose my children over a career. But you decide that, and then you decide the husband will keep the job and they will try to live off the money that he can make. And living in a society where most families have two parents working, and the norm is kids have their own rooms and they get new outfits each season, and you know how the whole consumerism is going on and on. You kind of need money from two parents, but now you try to do it from only one. It feels like a struggle for most people. It feels like a financial struggle to make this decision. And how can we, the three of us, sit here and say, oh, it'd be so much better if the dad was home as well? Most people would probably agree, but they would be, yeah, but we also need to pay the rent.
Yeah, I agree
about that.
I think what you've got to say about that is, let's face it, sometimes it's let's deal with the negative, then deal with the positive, right? Sometimes for dad, it's an escape out of the family to go to work. And they just don't want the thought of being around the family all day. And if that's in their minds, you're never going to convince them. But for the parents the dads who are saying, or whichever parent is, who are seeing, hey, I'm beginning to get the bug about this, but how do I do it? You know, your experience that you shared at the conference, that actually you realized the amount of time you're working, not to feed the family, but just to house the family and things. And if you can find a cheaper way of doing that, that would do it. So people need to do a proper audit of their life and say, what do I really need? What can I live without? And for people, it will be different. But the issue is, the real issue is this: can I afford not to work? Or really, can I afford not to be can we afford not to be a full-time whole family? Because what you save now by going to work may be actually far more far a lot less than what you actually would save in the long run from being a whole of family at that stage of life. And you know, the problem is we've actually been traveling over my lifetime, therefore your lifetimes, away from the family being the building block of society.
Yeah.
And I believe that we have to inspire families to want to travel back in the other direction. They're not going to get there overnight. They're not going to get there without problems, but they need to see and catch that bug that says, I cannot afford not to be moving in that direction. And okay, we have to give them clues, but in the end, you can give people clues, but until they say, I'm willing to pay the immediate price for the long-term gain, they're not going to move.
No,
and
it's true.
You know, like you said, Mum caught a vision first, and eventually Dad wasn't dragged screaming towards it, but he saw it for himself. And you can't always make people see things. You can only give them that example, let them a flavour, and that begins to cook in the back of their mouths. And hey, I quite like this, and then you come into it.
What you're saying made me think about several things. So I'll try to take them from an end.
Say one.
No, I want to say more.
Okay.
So when I was a child, I wasn't in kindergarten until I was 3 years old. Today, that would be strange. My sister was at home until she was 6. Back in, I think it was, I looked up the numbers, in 72 or something, only 5% of Danes of 15, I'm not sure on the numbers to be accurate, but a very few little percentage of the people were actually in this childcare from 0 to 2 or 3 years old. And now it has flipped. So now that is the normal. And combined with having houses where every child needs their own room with all their own toys in, and it's like there's duplicate toys in families now. If kids want the same thing, they have one in each room. It's just crazy. But it also made me think about a person mentioned to me, what about generational family houses? You don't see a lot of those around anymore. And that's actually maybe a place we could go as society to look for, should we come back to live together with families. And I think one of the troubles is, if you ask me, yes, but would you live together with your mom and dad? My answer would be no. But why would it be no? It would be no because I was not living together with my parents when we lived together, in the same sense that I'm living together with my children. I was away from them 8 to 10 hours a day, and we saw each other over lunch and
not even lunch.
No, over dinner. And I came home late because I had after leisure time activities. I was a swimmer, so we didn't see each other. And therefore, we have grown apart. We are family in the modern way, where we visit each other, but my mom would not live with me, and I would not live with my mom. And it's because we have grown apart. It's not because I do not want to or do not like them. And in the same sense, I really hope that our children wants to live with us if they have the opportunity. At least we haven't grown apart. We have seen each other, but now I remember what I wanted to say, which is sometimes the mind need to run. No, but sometimes people ask us, how can you stand being together with your kids all the time? And our answer to them is, well, if we understand it can be rough if you have been apart during the whole day, then the need your child have for reconnecting with you when they come home is very needy. And you might still be off at work inside your mind while you're trying to cook, and clean the kitchen, and then you have a child needy of your attention. And yes, that is annoying. It is annoying. But that is because you have been apart for so long that the connection is not there. And all the kids actually try to do is to reconnect. So it's not difficult to be together. It takes some time getting used to, of course.
This is an important point, that because we are 2 or 3 generations down this road, we do not know the skills of how to live together, even as a family, with our parents and things, right? And we may never, with our generation, well, not mine, you know, our parents are now no longer able to live with them, right? But we may never relearn that skill, right? But can we do enough so that our children can learn to live that skill, and so on? And it does take things to do it. I've not read it. I said at the conference, I'm not the book reader in our family. Mary's the book reader. I'm the film watcher, right? If there's a documentary, I'll watch that, but I'm not the book reader. Some friends in Finland, she told us she was reading a book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, which is about a researcher who had her first child, and she was beginning to think this parenthood is quite hard work. And she decided she'd go and look at some of the more less developed communities and how they parent. And she found a very different model to the Western model. Yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying about not doing the washing when the kids are there for that week or whatever. Because we live in a culture where we think kids needs to be amused. You've heard the word muse, from which we get museum. I think it's a Greek word. Do you know what it means?
It's something that inspires you, amuse.
To muse is to think, to ponder. In Greek, you turn a word into a negative by adding the letter A at the beginning. Which means you don't think, you don't ponder.
Oh, shit.
Right? And we are in a culture of amusement. Right? So kids have to be entertained. Education in schools now is much about entertaining them during the day and getting a few bits of information into them through the entertainment. It's not about teaching them to think or reason. So we go down this road of amusement in our parenting. So many toys and things. These 3 cultures, which I can't remember, but they're all very different. They treated their children as a team member from as soon as they could contribute anything to the family. From soon as they could toddle or something, contributing to the family became their normal. So they didn't see themselves as not responsible for doing things. They developed a responsibility. Now, the book, if you look on Amazon, it's got some negative things. People don't like the fact the cultures were all, parenting was kind of led by the mum in the home and things. They don't like things like that. But they don't like, the people who write that don't like family, in my understanding.
Yeah.
But family life is this. It's not meant to be amusement. It's meant to be living together and working together towards a shared objective. Now, if we go then back to the generational home, that is what I remember, right? Because my mother looked after her parents, my dad's parents, or my grandma on my dad's side had died by the time I was around, but she looked after them. And in return, there were times when they looked after me, and she probably got more out of it than that. And so if all you get is 2 generations in a family, parents and children, you don't get that same flow. But if you have a multi-generation, and interestingly, I think it's been pioneered in the Jewish community, they're now discovering that where you've got an old people's home, there's a really smart thing to do. Is if you've got an old people's home and a nursery in the same area, put them on the same premises. Because having the younger children around helps the older generation, and having the older generation around, guess what? It helps the younger generation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I talk, I think I said it in my thing at the conference. I like to say, look, nuclear family is important, but it should be fully supported by the extended family, which is more than just parents, it's everybody else. And they should be part of a community. So there's that. And then only if those 2 circles of support fail, should the state ever think about getting involved in family life. And I would go down as far as say that should include education. I don't think the state has any legitimate role in education, even though the world order is designed to say it has. It really hasn't. It should say that's not my responsibility. If your family, your extended family, and your community can't sort it, we will step in, but we are taking that role on very reluctantly and as a last resort. So I would say, yeah, for some people, and I do know people, I know a mum, she's a researcher, she's home educating, but her mum lives with them. And quite honestly, their mum carries a lot of the things because she's got to work and teach. Mum does oversees some of the not teaching as such, but just supervises what the kids are learning. Right? It's a multi-generational thing. So for some people who might have parents who can cope, because some might be able to cope. I don't want to say we've written off all the old generations. Some might be able to cope, especially going out here in England, in Britain. We do now have people of my generation who were home educators.
Yeah.
Wow.
And last year at Hef, there was somebody there about our age, and she was literally a home education grandma. She lived with the family, and she came to Hef with them and did everything, and they were a fuller family.
It sounds wonderful.
Majority. And so,
but the families really need the grandparent generation. There's something wrong with even thinking the family as the parents of the children. I remember when I had my first child, I really felt I needed my mother and I needed my grandmother. I needed them to just be around the whole, because you're very much a newbie when you have your first child. You don't know what you're doing. Imagine having someone to help you. That would be very nice. And I actually moved in with my mother and grandmother. That was very nice. I moved in with them. I lived with them for 3 or 4 months when I had my first child. And we moved in with them again.
Yeah.
We bought part of the house and lived as neighbors with my mother and grandmother for some years. And I remember the fact that my grandmother lived in the neighboring house wasn't even good enough, because she would sit there in her armchair, a little bored, a little waiting for us to come. But when I was in her house, I couldn't do the laundry. I couldn't cook some potatoes. I couldn't change a diaper. I'd have to go in and out and in and out and in and out. Whereas had she sat in my living room in an armchair, she could have read the kids a story while I cooked the potatoes and washed the clothes. And it would have been so much better to have her in-house. But the setup that we had just didn't really call for it. We had stairs and she couldn't do it.
No. And we weren't ready.
Oh, we
Or
were.
no,
With
not on
my
that
grandmother.
level. Yeah, but at the same
Oh,
time,
we talked about it so many times, how much nicer it would be,
yeah,
because
it
you
would
always
have been
think
I
that
easier.
think
bad
you're
punishment.
telling me one of you was ready and one
Well,
of you
Yeah.
wasn't
I don't know
ready.
if I would really have been ready, but we saw clearly that it would have been a much more practical setup. And that was my grandmother. So it was my children's great grandmother. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because my mother, when I had my first child, she was 46 and her youngest child was 11. So she was
Yeah.
not done being a mother herself, actually. So
Yeah.
my grandmother was the person who could step into that role of being somewhat elderly, having time
Yeah.
for reading fairy tales and knitting socks. Yeah.
And we recently, Cecilia's cousin got a child, and we visited them in Copenhagen, and they live like everybody else in what I would call dual loneliness, which is like you live a couple in an apartment, but you live alone still. You do not really know your neighbor on that level where it's not family. We make these small units everywhere. And Cecilia said something fun when we left them. And she just said, why don't somebody needs to move in with them for a month at least and just help out? Because when you become a parent, it is so hard work. There's a lot of stuff going.
Kid is newborn,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a 2-year-old, and you just need more hands in the beginning. You need someone to cook the food and do a bit of laundry and maybe take a nap with the older child, or I don't know. It just seemed and they were 2 adults, 2 children. It shouldn't be that hard. But somehow when I was in there, and they are good parents,
They're wonderful
resourceful people, yet in their home for 3-5 hours, I sat there, and when I left, I thought, there are not enough resources here. There should be someone here. Had I lived nearby, I would have been there 3 or 4 hours every day for a while, just to do the things, you know. But as I couldn't.
We've mentioned it earlier, but that's another part of the anti-family mindset we've got around, is you take people and move them apart who would otherwise. One of our saddest things is we've got 6 children, and it may be a bit much on top of each other, but if we all lived within walking distance, you wouldn't have to make an appointment to see people. You could just drop in, and maybe that staging post we're talking about for rediscovering family is not for everybody to move into the same house at one time, but to just move nearer to each other. So you don't have to ring up and say, I'm coming up for the day, is that all right? Or, whatever, you can just pop in for 20 minutes. And if something needs doing, you say, hang on, I'll do that for you while I'm here. And that type of thing. But they're skills we have, our great-great-great-grandparents might have had without realizing it, because it was their normal. But now our generation, or your generation, my generation, and the younger generation have never seen them being lived out. And we learn most things by example.
Yeah.
Education isn't knowledge, it's how you see other people living, and you say, there's something valuable there, I need to mimic that. A child mimics everything as they're growing up, and
but so does adults in many ways. They mimic the neighbor, they mimic their friends, they mimic what they see in the movies, the commercials. This whole lifestyle is being somewhat pushed on us by everything we see around us, and we try to be that, and it feels like some sort of fail to not be it. Feels like you're missing out. Or we have 4 children, only one of them ever had her own room. Could be, I don't know if social services are calling now, but
I just say it's actually a fail to go along with that agenda. It's a success when you as an individual or as a family says, I don't want to be swept along with this tide. I saw a book once with the title Letters to Anti-Flow, anti-Florence flow, right? But it was a picture of a shoal of fish going in one direction and one fish swimming in the other direction.
It's walking upstream.
going upstream. It's harder work.
It is.
People don't understand you. Why are you going that way? The crowds, the herd's going that way. No, I want to go because I see something valuable up there. And in a way, where do you get there? You get there by encouraging people to do a quality audit on the direction they're going. Not tell them what the outcome should be, but just say, what are your goals? What are you living for? What do you want your children to learn from your lifestyle that you think will do them good? I've looked at that for myself. I'm not going in that direction. And, and
I think that circles back to the anti-schooling agenda that we have, because schooling is in many ways, it is a curriculum-based idea. Someone, not you, not your parents, not even the teacher, very often it's government, coming up with a curriculum, telling you what you need to know, telling you what you need to do, which means you grow up in a reality where this is one of the most scary things I see about childhood, is that children are constantly evaluated. No matter what they do, someone will tell them whether they did it good or not, whether they were supposed to do that or something else. And if you're constantly evaluated, constantly up against this curriculum, then how will you ever figure out what you want? There's no loop, there's no system of pointing back to your emotional life, a reward feeling when you do something you feel like doing. But no one's going to tell you whether that was right or you did it well, because it was just something you felt like doing. So when you go to bed at night, you'll have to feel within yourself, did that feel right? How does this sit with me? Do I want to do it again tomorrow? All of that is totally lost in telling kids what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and where to do it, and telling them you have to do it again whether you like it or not. We all agree, everyone agrees that no kids like school. We all agree kids would like to avoid school. That's like in the movies, in the cartoons, in the literature for kids. It's a standard. Everyone knows the kids, they just look for recess and summer break. So we all agree they don't like it, yet we push them to do it, and we tell them whether they did it well or not. How can they know what they want? How will they ever know what they want? That's really scary.
Yeah,
it's really scary. I don't know whether you know that there's fairly good research now that says the number of self-harm amongst young people goes down during school holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to engage with that level of research because the governments have too much invested in the school system, because it is Ken Robinson did a video where he pointed it out that it was originally brought in there to prepare people to work in the factories.
Yeah.
And the military like people who come from that disciplined schooling background because they do what they're told, they don't think for themselves.
Yeah.
And home educators, world schoolers, the lot are a danger to the state, which is why they're trying to wipe us out. And I mean that they are trying to wipe us out internationally, because we are a danger, because we can produce too many children who think for themselves and say, I'm not going to jump through your hoops.
Mm-hmm.
And school is training in jumping through hoops. The exam system. I read something, I don't know where it came from, but the guy used a wonderful thing. It was only last night, I read it on Facebook. Somebody had posted the graphic. Basically, he was saying that this is a system to test people, but the tests aren't real tests, because if you say what grows on apple trees and you say leaves, you give the wrong answer, right? Mm-hmm. But actually it's the right answer, it's just not the prescribed answer.
Exactly.
And since then I've been meditating on that. And you could also say, well, bark grows on apple trees, moss grows on apple trees, bugs grow on apple trees. And there's a whole load of things, and you could get really interested in what grows on an apple tree. But if you're in the system only wants the answer they want you to give.
Yeah.
And that is a real problem. But I don't think we'll ever turn the system. The system is what it is. What we have to do is encourage parents not to sacrifice their children to that system. And to do it the best way they can.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be easy. I think in England, the political situation, my talk was called When Governments Aren't Listening.
Yeah, I remember.
And my answer was, fortify your backbone. You've got to be determined. If you want an easy life and you want your children to benefit from being brought up as into being whole adults who don't just follow the crowd, then you're going to have to pay a price.
Yeah.
One way or another, you're going to have to pay a price. And which is why I say, can you afford not to pay that price and sacrifice your children to the system?
But sometimes it's very well spoken. Thank you.
That's all right.
Sometimes I think some of the things that we have sacrificed has been very much a relief not to have. So lots of
we haven't sacrificed those children to the system, so it's the price.
Sacrifice the price to
Yeah.
pay for the life that we live, where we have our kids home with us, and we've had that for 12 years, 14 years now. It's so they don't have their own room. We don't even have a house. We could have a house. We don't want to. But there's a lot of financial sacrifice, obviously, as I could have made money, and you could probably have made a lot more money if you weren't distracted by your children. But would I want that life? Now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm actually happy that we can, can handle ourselves without all of that. It's just, what is it? Some fluffy side effects.
No. Let's give you a scientific parable of that picture of it, right?
Thank you.
Analogy. We are all tied to the earth by gravity. Right? Can you imagine living a life without gravity? No, right?
No.
But if you look at pictures when it takes a lot of effort to get up there above where gravity affects, but you look at pictures of the space station and we think, oh, wouldn't it be great just to be floating around, right? Without gravity. Now, that is only an analogy. It isn't a real thing. But the problem is with these things that we think we can't live without, they're actually more of a burden than a benefit.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is, when you get rid of that burden, you suddenly realize the benefit of not carrying that around with me. Why was I being so stupid? Why was I being so hard to let go? Well, it's the familiar. It's what we're used to. It's the gravity that holds us to the earth, holds us locked into this lifestyle. And I'm not saying this means you have to go on the road. It doesn't for everybody, right?
No.
That's right for you, family, right? That's right for your family, right? For now. But for some people, it may never be right. But to say, hang on, I'm not sacrificing my family to this system, I think is something that every parent should ask. Illustration, years ago, we were home educating our younger children were being home educated. The older ones, because it started at this parents' cooperative school, were still there. It was the school that told us about home education. And some friends of ours, Dad said to me, Randall, can you tell me any good reasons why I should home educate my children? And I said to him, you're asking me the wrong question. can you tell me any good reasons why you should send your children to school?
Yeah.
And they ended up home educating
Yeah,
all
wonderful.
their family, right?
Mm.
Because you change the paradigm. So, you know, I would say to dads who are struggling with this one, dads in particular, but to families that are struggling with it, if you are in this place where you're not sure, ask yourself what the good reasons are. And I would say to them, you've seen the treadmill that going through that school system has put you on. You experience it every day. Now look forward and say, do I want my children to get their own treadmill? Or do I want them to be able to run free in the fields? Because that is what's keeping people trapped. It's they're on a treadmill and they don't know any other way of generating an income. They don't know any other way of providing for what they need. Now, they still may have to do work. I think you talked in yours when you got that question, which I take it you often get when people are asking you about what about an income, is don't ditch everything, all your skills. Look at what your skills are, but see how can you use those skills in a different way.
Yeah.
That's a really good piece of advice, which is why I'm repeating it, even though you know it. Right? Because that's what people have got to do. I've got these skills. They're normally put into practice in this context. How can I put them into practice in a different context? Not maybe earn as much, but enough to feed us in a different lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
There's a word that has been popping in my mind for a long time of the conversation, and now I need to say it. It is when you walk around in the inner parts of Copenhagen, we still have some of the old buildings where we put children in the start. They were called, and I just smile every time I see it. Now today we call it a daycare, childcare, kindergarten, whatever. Back then, when we started it many years ago, it was called child asylums, and I just love it. Yes,
that's a word that's evolved. You know, it was a place of protection, but now it's a place of.
And you said, as you said about if the family and the extended family and the community couldn't take care, back then we had the child asylums.
But the thing was, I talked to my grandmother about this, and she was born in 26.
Yeah.
And she had children in the 50s. And she said back then an asylum was only for poor people. She couldn't have her children in a nursery because she was married and her husband made money. It was really for those desperate single mothers who would leave their babies alone.
Yeah.
And go to the factory because that was the only opportunity they saw.
Yeah.
Those mothers could put their children in a nursery, which, as you say, that's the last resource. If they don't have a friend or a mother or a sister or anyone to help them when they really need to go out and make some money because their husband died or whatever happened, then an asylum is needed. And now we just stuff all the kids in there. It's as if the mothers can't get away from their babies soon enough. And that's not fair to say because they all cry when they do it. But they're just forced so heavily into this narrative of this being the right thing to do. And they'll stop crying in 5 minutes and you need to use your brain and you need your education and all of that.
And you're not being a good parent if you don't leave them here.
Exactly. They'll fall behind.
Emotional blackmail.
Have you heard that idea? I've heard that idea. Children in nurseries, this is children up to 2 years old, can fall behind if they don't show up every day. I'm just asking this question. What can you fall behind on when you're 2 years old? Seriously,
being squeezed into the mold.
I just don't get it. Someone please explain to me
Yeah.
what is expected of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
To me, I don't get it. I'm not willing to get. I'm not.
You don't
No.
have to
Really,
get it.
seriously. And someone asked me when I looked after my kids when they were small, are you qualified to do that? And I was like, are you shitting me? Qualified. This is my child. He's 3 years old. Am I qualified?
I think the answer we ought to encourage people
Wow.
to give is, I was qualified as your great grandmother was to look after a 3-year-old.
Oh yes.
And now I'm looking after a 17-year-old and I feel qualified. And he's looking after me, the sweet guy, offering me his hand when we walk uphill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. That's family. It works both ways. What I was saying about this, teaching children they have a value in the family team from soon as they can contribute, not forcing it on them, but letting it become something they value doing themselves. I can help mum, I can help dad.
Yeah.
Right. But the culture in which we live is parents can't parent. The state cannot, only the state can parent. Parents,
Yeah, and there are standards and we have to measure it, and there are like things you need to live up to a certain, at a certain age. They need to, I because I got so shocked by this, you can fall behind in kindergarten or even in the nursery, and are you qualified to just looking after your own kids? I looked into it, and actually there is something, the equivalent of a curriculum for nurseries and for kindergarten, something where you have like this checklist you can look at. There's a 3.5-year-old and you check all these boxes, and if you can tick 80% of them, the child is on track. And to me, it looks like obsessive compulsive disorder. Really, it looks like, the standardization of human life. It's scary business that you would raise a flag if a child is not using a pair of scissors at the right timing, or not using the right vocalization of his inner needs because they need to learn to use the word no in the right way in the grammar, or whatever it is. They come up with these weird filters to figure out if kids are on track, because I don't know, maybe because they don't know them. In a family, you would know if something was wrong. You don't need a standardized check sheet. You'll know, oh, my kid is not doing well. What's going on?
Yeah. And actually, the testing of the kids is really a testing of the system. Yeah.
It's not even about the kids, but the kids are paying the price. They are suffering when they're tested.
They're paying a big price, but so are the families and everything and everybody else, because it's to keep the wheels of this machine turning. It's not actually for the best for the children, but that would be another whole 18 podcasts to look at.
Well, let's do some more.
Yeah.
I was thinking here it has to be the end of the story at some point. We can't talk all night, but we could do another one, I think. But could we come up with, because we are all so much in agreement, which is so nice for the three of us. No, but I know how radical it felt for us, the idea of not schooling. And I know how extreme this could maybe sound to a family who by some accident pressed play on this podcast. But they are having their lifestyle. They have 2 jobs. They have a nice life. They have the nursery and the school, and they're as happy as they feel is okay. But then maybe they want this. The family thing strikes a nerve. They want to be more family. Can we come up with, some steps that you can take without doing the radical thing? Is it possible to nurture your family life without, but just because we can lure them in, No, but without doing the radical thing first, could you maybe, is there a way to take a baby step and see how it feels before you take the kids out of school?
Well, I'll tell you what, very quickly, I'll tell you what the first baby step for me was deciding not to send my children to a state school, but to a school that was run as a parents' cooperative. That was my first.
That's a good beginning, yeah.
That was my first step. You don't always have them, but then I always sensed that was the first step. The next step came when we decided to home educate. And when I made that first step, I'd never heard of home education.
Yeah.
No.
I learned about it through that school, and then I took the next step.
Yeah.
And you know, it was funny because Mary did some of the teaching at the school, and most of the mums said, who were there during the day able to do teaching, go in on some days, said, I'll do teach, but I don't want to teach my children. I don't want them to be in the class I'm teaching. Where Mary said, I'll come in and do some teaching as long as the classes have my children in them. And so there was that, but that was it. And then some years later, I got involved in the political side and things. And yes, people say to us, would you still do the same thing if you were starting all over again? Well, I say at my age, I don't want to start all over again. Thank you. I wish when I started, I had gleaned the wisdom I had now, because no, I wouldn't do exactly the same thing. I'd be more radical.
Yeah, me too. Me too. If I had known 20 years ago what I know now, man, it would have been a different
45
life.
years ago, if I knew what I knew, I would have been different.
Wow.
So this is going to be my last thing, because I think we're going to be sending people to sleep soon. All right. My motto these days is this. This is my objective. I want to inform people. I want to inspire people so they take independent action.
Yes.
And to take ownership themselves of wherever they are. Because we live in a culture where everybody thinks, and sadly, even a growing number of home educators still think the government owes them so many things. And I said in response to an inquiry, one which I won't go into the details of, the best way to make people irresponsible is to take their responsibilities away from them.
Yeah.
And I want to say to parents, take back your parenthood. Take back your parenting. Small steps are better than no steps. So if you can't go to the radical thing of living in a van and going all over the place, take some steps. Let me inspire you to take some steps to become more of a whole parent and take back your parenting.
Amen.
And on that note, Randall, I would like to thank you a lot for your time. We will talk with you again, no doubt. But for the people out there who wants to see if they can find more of what you have written about or done, is there a place where they can find some of the knowledge you have shared?
Yeah, there's my own personal political home educating website is called No Nationalisation of Our Kids. And I'll put the link on there. That dates back from 2009 when I first got involved in the politics. And if you don't mind me saying so, it still feels increasingly prophetic every time I have to tell somebody the name, because we've seen it happening. We've seen the nationalisation of our kids. I've also got an involvement in a site called the HE Bite that is on top of the politics in this country. And I'll give you the links for them, and we probably best to put it in the thing. But No Nationalisation of Our Kids is my own personal one, and I've just posted there in the last couple of days my talk from the HEF conference. So if people want to catch that up, it'll be there. And I might even say to you, can I stick this episode on that same website as well?
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
yeah. total sense.
Yes. So, Randall, it's time for goodbye. We will post all the links, and it has been wonderful connecting with you again. And I look forward to next time. Thank you.
For
And
all
I
that you
very
do.
much look forward to next time. Thank you for inviting me into your mobile home for this chat.
It was lovely. Thank you.